दुरूद पढ़ो। हसन हुसैन से मजलूम पर दुरूद पढ़ो। तमाम अइम्मे मासूम पर दुरूद पढ़ो। मुहिब चाहरदा मासूम पर दुरूद पढ़ो। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद। दुरूद पढ़ने से चेहरे पे नूर का हुजूर। दुरूद पढ़ने से सब दिल की हो सियाही दूर। दुरूद पढ़ने से हर एक कल्ब हो पुरनूर। दुरूद पढ़ने से मिलती है बाग़े खुल्द में हूर। मुहिब चाहरदा मासूम पर दुरूद पढ़ो। सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद। दुरूद पढ़ने से हर एक काम होता है। दुरूद पढ़ने से उक़बा में नाम होता है। दुरूद पढ़ने से गुलगू कलाम होता है। दुरूद पढ़ने से खुशबू मशाम होता है। मुहिब चाहरदा मासूम पर दुरूद पढ़ो। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद। दुरूद पढ़ के पुकारा कलम दमे इरकाम। अमीन रोक लो अब तो सने जुबां की लगाम। रसूल फातिमा ज़हरा है और 12 इमाम। यही बुजुर्ग है सब लाए के दुरूद व सलाम। मुहिब चाहरदा दुरूद पढ़ो। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद।
رحم الله من يقرأ سورة الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. الحمد لله رب العالمين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد. صلى على محمد آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين، واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد. Your second salawat for love of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. And your loudest salawat is condolences to the Imam of our time, Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بذكرنا المسائب آل محمد. May Allah increase in our reward for commemorating the difficulties of Ahlul Bayt. We have been blessed with this opportunity that inshallah across the next 3 nights we will discuss about this personality, this great personality of the daughter of Rasulullah. And the conversations I want to have it is broken into 3 parts. Tonight we'll discuss about why this is such an important issue to have this conversation, why this commemoration is so significant. Tomorrow night, the spiritual inheritance from Bibi Fatima, and the night after, the physical inheritance, or the practical material inheritance from the life of Bibi Fatima. Looking at these 3, the first conversation is, why is it so important to commemorate this Shahadat? And it's important to understand that the Shahadat of Bibi Fatima is not just a historical point, but it is an aqaidi point that is associated with the fundamental philosophy of your faith. When we look at this life and we see that, for example, that how could it be that something that's a historical point could be associated with the fundamental of your faith, there are a variety of different things that come up that they look very simple on the face of them, but they have a very deep impact. I'll give you an example. When we look at, for example, friends and who we make friends with, I think it's pretty free in choice that I can make a friend with anyone. I can make anybody my friend. But this making of friends actually has an impact on your faith, has an impact on your philosophy of faith and who you are as a person. And that it's a reflection of who you are. You see, our Prophet makes a statement, he says, Al-mar'u ala deen khalilihi. A man is on the faith of his friends. If I take it so casually that I can make anyone my friend, because what does that have to do with anything else? You know, anybody can be my friend. The consequence of that is that I may start to adopt the attributes of this person. It may not happen that, for example, I'll leave my faith entirely, or I'll leave and I'll say I don't believe in Islam anymore. No. But part of faith is the character that's demonstrated, that's seen from your behavior. And if, for example, someone looking at me can't tell what my faith and ideology is because my friends don't share that ideology, then I've adopted that faith and it's become a part of me. Which is why even the concept of making friends is very significant to be careful about, because it impacts your aqeedah, your faith of who you are as a person. And it shouldn't be something that's given away to someone lightly. The impact of these friends we see that Allah describes on the Day of Judgment, that يَوْمَ يُعِذُّ الظَّالِمُ عَلَى يَدَيْهِ, that on the Day of Judgment there will be those who are considered oppressors who will bite at their hands in frustration. يَا لَيْتَنِي اتَّخَذْتُ مَعَ رَسُولِ السَّبِيلَ, I wish I had followed the path of the Holy Prophet. وَلَمْ أَتَّخِذْ فُلَانًا خَلِيلًا, and I had not taken so as a friend. لَقَدْ أَضَلَّنِي بَعْدَ إِذْ جَاءَنِ السَّبِيلِ, that he led me astray after I had found the right path. This discussion Allah has in the Quran is a discussion about saying that first and foremost that friends do impact the aqeedah, which is why you're complaining about your friend on the Day of Judgment. You're biting at your hands in frustration. And you're saying, I had found the correct path. I was going towards what Allah wanted me to. I was doing everything right. And then this friend who came to me led me astray and took me away from the path of Rasulullah and took me away from the path of Islam. So it seems like something simple, like a friend. What does a friend have to do with my faith? But no, it has something central to do with my faith. Which is why the expanding conversation of this is the concept of marriage. That there are those who say, oh, what does it matter who you marry? As long as you're a Muslim and I practice my faith, my spouse can have any faith. No. If a man or a person is on the faith of their friend, what is your spouse if not your closest friend? That it has an impact. That those who take it lightly, that marry anyone, who cares as long as I'm a Muslim, I follow my faith. No, you'll lose your faith in this process. And that's why these concepts have to do with the fundamental of aqeedah, which is why when we look back at this story and look back at the history of Bibi Fatima, it's not just an event in history, but it's a proof of our aqeedah to understand who this person is and to stay attached to her and not to separate from her. You see, this daughter of Rasulullah is the answering of a promise Rasulullah is given in the Holy Quran. The verse that we began our discussion with comes from Surah Al-Dhuha, in which Allah says, وَلَسَوْفَ يُعْتِيكَ رَبُّكَ فَتَرْضَى. Soon your Lord will give you and you will be very pleased with what Allah gives you. Some Mufassirin looking at this verse came to the conclusion that Allah is talking about in the hereafter. Why? Because the verse prior to it, Allah makes it say, وَالْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنَ الْأُولَى, and that the hereafter is better for you than what came before it. So they assume that the answer of what Allah will give our Prophet is in the hereafter, not in this world. And one of the explanations comes from the riwayat of Ahlul Bayt, even that say that the first to have intercession on the Day of Judgment will be our prophet. And he will intercede for people to such an extent that Allah will eventually ask him, are you pleased? And he will say, yes, now I am pleased, because he has interceded for so many people. And I say that this is the answer to this dua. Others looked at it and said, no, because when Allah makes a promise, He doesn't just make a promise for the hereafter, He makes a promise that fits into this world and the hereafter. So there has to be a manifestation of this answering, that Allah will give you something in this world that will make you happy. So other mufassirin came to the conclusion, and they presented and said, yes, here what Allah is promising, وَلَسَوْفَ يُعْتِيكَ رَبُّكَ فَتَرْضَى, is pertaining to the victories of Islam. And that Islam, which was a very weak religion in the beginning and very few people followed it, eventually what will happen is that Islam will take ghalaba, will overcome everything else and will become the major religion, and Islam will win many victories and will become an authority in this land. And they said that this is what Allah is saying, that soon you'll be very pleased with what I give you, and what Allah will give our Prophet is victory. But this doesn't quite make sense. Why? Because our Prophet was never interested in the material world. He was never interested in physical wealth and possession, and that his kingship or his authority should expand over society. All our Prophet cared about was keeping Allah happy. There's a famous hadith where at one point in time Jibreel comes to our Holy Prophet and he says, Ya Rasulullah, Allah has commanded me that if you permit me to, I will make all of the city of Medina out of gold for you. And this will not decrease in iota of your status on the Day of Judgment. Meaning there's no accounting for this, and this is all for you. They describe that our Prophet replied and he says, O Jibreel, all I want from Allah is enough food for one meal, and that for the next time I need to eat, I have to pray to Allah to provide for me. So meaning if his perspective was so simple that, he didn't even want enough that he could have days or months. And look at us, we want months worth of material to be satisfied or feel safe, or years worth of safety. The Prophet was that one, he says, I just want one meal. And then after that, I should have to ask Allah again to provide for me. To say that he would be pleased by winning victories in Islam and developing a major kingdom doesn't fit his attribute. Even to the extent where when he would walk into a room, when he was leading the entire Muslim empire, they would say he would sit amongst his companions in such a way, you couldn't tell the difference between him and everybody else. You would have to ask the question, who amongst these people is a prophet of Allah? So how could victory be something that will please the Prophet? How could that be what he was going to receive? Which is why other mufassirin came forward and said that the answer to this dua, answer to this promise that Allah makes, is in the verse, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Inna a'ataynaka al-kawthar. That certainly we gave you Kawthar. What is this Kawthar? Some say it's the pond on the Day of Judgment that will provide water. Others give other explanations. One of the explanations of Kawthar is it's a compound word from the term khayr al-kathir, a great goodness. And certainly we have given you a great goodness. What is this great goodness? The context of this surah gives us an intention of what this is intended to. That when we say, Inna a'ataynaka al-kawthar, fasalli li rabbika wanhar, so then praise your Lord and sacrifice in His way. Inna sha'aniyaka huwa al-abtar. That soon your enemies will know, those who are your oppressors will know, who is abtar without a lineage. So these three verses, the way they're structured, that we have given you khayr al-kathir, so pray to Allah and sacrifice towards Him, and that your enemies will know who is the one who is abtar, who is the one without a lineage, without a continuation, points to us and tells us that that khayr al-kathir is that personality that will ensure that the lineage of Rasulullah continues and that his children and his family are present here, and that is the khayr al-kathir that Allah promises, and that is the lineage of Bibi Fatimiyya Zahra, salamullahi alayha. Meaning that this is a promise that Allah makes to our Prophet, and its fulfillment is Bibi Fatima. Through that fulfillment, we start to realize that this is not a normal personality. This isn't a normal, for example, child that is born to the Prophet, that if she dies, and history should forget her. But know that if she is the fulfillment of a promise from Allah, then there is some significance to who this personality is. And she is unique in ways that no one else is unique. In understanding this, you take a look at some of her titles. For example, one of her titles is Muhaddatha, the one to whom the angel spoke. Now understand something. In the history of this world, there are some ladies to whom Allah spoke. The same way there are Anbiya to whom Allah sent messages, there are some ladies to whom Allah gave instruction as well too. For example, the mother of Nabi Musa. When Nabi Musa is born, Allah gives wahi to her to place this child into the box and put him in the river and will return him to you. And that be satisfied that I will return this child to you is something that a promise that Allah makes and gives instruction. Bibi Maryam in the Quran, Allah describes and says that Jibreel comes to her and speaks to her. Wahi is given to her. Inna Allah astafaki wa tahharaki wa istafaki ala sa'ir nisa'il alameen. That Allah gives the instruction and says that, O Maryam, we have chosen you and we have purified you and we have chosen you over all of the women of this world. Shows that revelation was given. But the revelation given to Bibi Fatima is much bigger and much more azim than the revelation given to any of these ladies. The explanation is, it says that from our sixth Imam, he explains and he says that after the shahadat of the Holy Prophet, to console Bibi Fatima, Jibreel would come and give wahi, revelation to her, to comfort her after the death of her father. And that Amir al-Mu'mineen would write this wahi that was being received. Imam Sadiq explains, he says, this that was revealed to Bibi Fatima is 3 times the length of the Holy Quran. And it contains not a word of the Holy Quran, but rather it contains all of what happened before and what will happen until the Day of Judgment. And that this is known as Mushaf Fatima, the book of Bibi Fatima. One of the signs of our Imam is, one of the miracles that our Imam possesses that proves his Imamate is the possession of this book. Some ulama went further to explain this. They said, to understand what really this book is, that she is muhaddatha, that the one to whom the angels speak, is look and pay attention that Allah sends a revelation to console her after the death of her father. And that consolation was narrating the fada'il, the great status of her father Rasulullah. To narrate the fada'il of Rasulullah, Jibreel would have to begin talking from the start of Adam and give all of the history of humanity to show how he was rahmatul lil alameen that came before, and then give all of the knowledge of what will come forward to show how the rahmat of Rasulullah will continue on this world to the Day of Judgment. And really this entire book was about the status of Rasulullah and the fadail of Rasulullah that were presented to Bibi Fatima in that moment. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. One of the other uniquenesses of her status that tell us that she's not a normal person is her status and title of being known as Abiha, the mother of her father. Now you see, as Muslimin, we believe in the greatness of the status of al-Mu'mineen, the mother of the believers. That in the Quran, Allah dictates and says, "An-Nabiyyu awla bil-mu'minina min anfusihim wa azwajuhu ummahatuhum." Surah Al-Ahzab. This verse is there, which shows the status of the wives of the Prophet by saying this Prophet has more authority over you, over the mu'mineen, than they have over themselves. Wa azwajuhu, and his wives, ummahatuhum, and his wives are the mothers of all the mu'mineen. And we say, al-Mu'mineen, great status, great position. The reality of the title of al-Mu'mineen has a very lengthy discussion around it, that is it really a status or is it a restriction? And it's more of a restriction than it is a status, because of its meaning and interpretation. But look at the amazingness of how Sayyidah Fatima is titled as Abiha. No one else has ever been given such a title as the mother of her father. And who is that father? That father is that person who is the mercy to all of humanity and mercy to all of mankind. That she is that one who protected and cared for her father in such a way that she was given such a title, that if there is someone who has such a position with the mercy of mankind, that it's his own daughter who holds this unique status. It's not something normal. It's not something that an average person could attain. That even the wives of the Prophet can't go beyond being the mothers of the believers. But what is the difference between the believers and the one who introduces Islam and belief and to be known as his mother is something unique and special. Which is why even the name Fatima is not something normal. Let me explain. In history, before Bibi Fatima, there were other people known as Fatima. Fatima was a name that was used before. For example, the mother of Imam Ali was Fatima bint Asad. And there were others in the history of the Banu Hashim who possessed this name, and we have the records. But this name of Fatima is different than all of them because of the one who names her. You see, when you and I name our children, and we name them, for example, Hassan, we name them, for example, Zainab, we name them, for example, Khadija, we name them all these great names. We name them after personality and hope that our child will embody these personalities. For example, when you have a son name and you name him Abbas, you want him to love Ahlul Bayt, you want him to be strong, you want him to be brave, you want for him to possess these attributes. But see, when Allah names somebody, He doesn't want them to be that. He knows they are that. And they are perfect in their embodiment of that. When, for example, Allah names Bibi Zainab Zainab, the name of Sayyidah Zainab is given to her by Allah directly. Zainabiha, the beauty of her father, she is the perfection of the beauty of her father. It's not a question, is she or isn't she? The same way when Bibi Fatima is given the name Fatima and Allah names her Fatima, it's not an accident, or it's not hoping that she will possess the attribute of Fatima. She is the perfection of the attribute of Fatima. Which is why there's a hadith that says that Rasulullah asks Jibreel, لِمَاذَا سُمِّيَتْهَا Fatima? Why was she named Fatima? And Jibreel answers in two statements. لِأَنَّهَا فَاطِمَةَ شِيعَتُهَا عَنِ النَّارِ وَفُتِمُوا أَعْدَاؤُهَا مِنْ حُبِّهَا. These two statements explain why she is the perfection of the name of Fatima. And Jibreel says that she is named Fatima because she is the one who will Fatima separate Shi'atuha, her Shia, from the fire of hell. Meaning her personality has to do with Aqidah, but it goes even further. وَفُتِمُوا, that then this becomes Mabni Majhul, that someone will separate from her enemies from her love. And this explains that Allah will be the one that separates her enemies from loving her. This explanation tells us that this personality is a central figure in understanding what your religion demands from you. And that if you understand this, that you've attached yourself to Sayyidah Fatima and to the message of Rasulullah, and that you are saved from the fire of hell. And two, that if you don't attach yourself to her, then you are someone who Allah will separate you from her, and that you won't be able to receive her benefit from loving her and be able to get the intercession that she is promised on the Day of Judgment. Before we explain how this becomes reality and why this is an aqaidi point, look at the reality of the fact that today her grave is not known to us. People go to the ziyarat of Medina many times, but you don't know where her grave is, and which is why the consequences of majority of Muslims don't know to say salam to her, to ask for her intercession. That her intercession has been removed from everybody except those who understand who she is. You can't just go to her grave and say salam and say that, oh, she'll reply to my salam. No, that has been hidden from you, which shows that there's some significance to this point, that not everyone can access this. This is something very limited of who has the ability to go to that location. When we say, for example, the intercession of Aba Abdullah and the support of Aba Abdullah, every person today that looks online, that sees the event of Arba'in, has an interest and a curiosity to say, what is in this place? And all types of people come and they go to this location and they go and attend, and maybe they make their du'as and maybe they don't. But they have the ability to reach this place and the barakat it has. But no one except those who understand the right and authority of Bibi Fatima have the ability to seek her intercession, and hence the azamat of her status and why it's important not to forget this shahadat and not to separate ourselves from it. It goes even further. Everybody's okay? All right? All right, if you're going to go to sleep, I'll go to sleep too. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Our Prophet would explain, and he says, Fatima bad'atum minni. Fatima is a piece of me. Explaining the proximity and relationship and explaining a very important fact about her. Let me show you where this becomes relevant. One of the events associated with Bibi Fatima is the event of Fadak. And what is the event of Fadak? During the fourth major battle of Islam, which is known as the Battle of Khaybar, this is where the Muslims became wealthy. Prior to the Battle of Khaybar, the Muslims were poor. They didn't have much wealth. But in Hijaz, in Arabia, there was a population of Jewish people who had moved to Arabia and left the Levant areas and came to Arabia. Why? Because their books had told them that the great prophet that will come next will be in the lands of Arabia. So they had been migrating into Arabia and settling into Arabia, and they had picked some of the best lands in Arabia, which were the lands known around Khaybar. And what they did was they built a fort in the middle of these lands to protect all of their properties and wealth. And these were some of the most productive lands in all of Hijaz. And they had established them comfortably. When Khaybar becomes a threat to Islam and our Prophet raises an army against Khaybar and this fort, and we know that when they defeat this fortress, Islam becomes very wealthy. Islam becomes a world power at this point in time and has wealth to take care of all of its people. But all this is only because of what was stored in the fortress. The people who lived on the lands around this fortress and had the production that produced all the resources for the fortress, these lands were called Fadak. In some narrations it's a composition of 7 villages, in some narrations it's bigger than that, in some narrations it's smaller than that. But they were called the gardens of Fadak. Why? Because they were the producing lands where agriculture would grow and wealth would be amassed for the people who lived there. Now, when the people who live there, these Jewish tribes that live there, they realize that Khaybar has fallen, they realize that if we fall to the Muslims and the Muslims then move from the conquest of this fort and conquer our lands, whenever the Muslims conquer something, it gets split amongst all of the Muslimin and everybody gets a share. And they realize everything we've built, all of our lands and property will be forcefully taken away from us because we've lost this war and we'll have to surrender and walk away and start all over again. So they came up with an idea, and the idea was this, that let's surrender to the Holy Prophet. Let's voluntarily turn ourselves over to the Prophet. Some explanations say they got this idea from what happened to the Bani Qurayza. The Bani Qurayza was a tribe of Jews in the city of Medina who had made a treaty with the Muslims, and they violated this treaty in the Battle of Khandaq, the Battle of Ahzab. And they committed treachery against the Prophet and Muslimin. And after the Muslims won the Battle of Khandaq, they selected a judge other than the Holy Prophet, and the judge ruled that all the men who committed the treachery of this tribe and violated the treaty, they should be killed, and the women and the children have to be cast out. And our Prophet explained, had you come to me and asked me to rule over you, I would have been merciful to you. So the tribes of Fadak, what they do is when they realize that now that the fortress has fallen, we're next to lose, they go to the Prophet and they surrender themselves to him. So if the Muslims don't fight, they don't get a share. So they get to maintain their property, and they ask the Prophet, we'll surrender ourselves to you, we'll stay on our faith, but this is all your property, nobody else's. The Prophet accepts. So no Muslim has a right over the property of Fadak. And then the Prophet in turn takes this property and gifts it to his daughter, Sayyidah Fatima. To the extent that we know that even in her life, in his life, that she used to have managers who would manage this property, and amongst those managers was personalities like Salman Farsi, who used to work for Bibi Fatima and manage these properties. Now comes the question, and the interesting part, is that what happens to this property after the Shahadat of the Prophet? You see, those who usurped this authority and took the Khilafah needed a way to finance the government. As long as the Prophet was alive, Bibi Fatima would take all of the wealth that came from this property because they weren't interested in wealth. The same way Rasulullah was not interested in wealth, Imam Ali was not interested in wealth, Bibi Fatima was not interested in wealth. Whatever wealth would come in from this, she would give it into the religion of Islam and give to the Prophet to support and take care of the Muslimin. But after the death of the Prophet, why would she give this wealth to the usurper? And the usurper needed wealth to run the government that he just usurped. Now, this isn't the only example where they did something inappropriate to gain wealth. One of the examples that we talk about is the death of Malik ibn Nuwayra. Malik ibn Nuwayra was from a leader of a tribe that was close to Medina but not within Medina. After the Shahadat of the Prophet, Malik takes the zakat and the khums and the wealth of his tribe to pay into the Holy Prophet and comes to the city to realize the Prophet has died. And he looks around the city and he realizes and sees that Imam Ali, who should be an authority, is not an authority. So he takes his money and he walks out of Medina. And he recites poetry that I have seen the world be turned upside down, I have seen right become wrong. And he basically announces that whatever's happening in Medina is wrong. As soon as he takes this money and leaves, the first Khalifa turns to Khalid ibn Walid and sends him to go stop this guy. Because one, he's not paying into the government, and if the Muslims don't pay into the government will fail. And two, Malik has the ability, because he's the leader of his tribe, and he has a big tribe, that he could raise an army to come back and fight against the Khalifa. So Khalid takes his soldiers and he goes to Malik, and famously kills Malik ibn Nuwayra, takes the money and the wealth, and even, for example, abuses his wife and takes his wife as his own and does many, many atrocities in this instance. Why? Because if the funding dries up, the government fails. So the same concept now happens, that fadak is a source of funding for that government, so it has to be taken. So they take away Bibi Fatima's property of fadak. When they do this, Bibi Fatima now appeals for her property. And she says, this is mine, and it was given to me in the life of the Holy Prophet. And they say, no, it wasn't. And then the second appeal is that then if he didn't give it to me, it's my inheritance, because I am the daughter of the Prophet. Before we even get to the question of inheritance, the first question that's asked in this, or the first demand that's made, that this is my property, give it to me, and the answer that's given, no, it's not, there's no proof of that, is the point of demonstrating why the discussion around Bibi Fatima is a discussion of aqaid and philosophy of faith. Remember how I said, Fatima bada'atun minni? Fatima is a piece of the Prophet. Can the Prophet lie? So now when Bibi Fatima comes forward and says that this is mine, and you say, no, it's not, you've done one of two things. Either one, you've called her a liar, and you've called the Prophet a liar, and you've shown that you don't believe in any of this. Or two, she's telling the truth and you lied against them. And that you lied and belied the message of the Prophet, and therefore you've also cast out yourself from the message of Islam. That entire discussion around the fact that this is her property, and the argument is bring two witnesses, and she brings Imam Ali and Ayman. First off, why is it that she, who is the daughter of the Prophet and truthful, and there's no question about her truthfulness, why does she have to bring witnesses? Even this is wrong. And I can show you an example. Do you guys want to hear a story? We're close to the end. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. During the Khilafat of Imam Ali, he happened to be walking through the market and he came upon a Jewish shopkeeper that was selling a suit of armor. Imam Ali looks at the suit of armor and he says, hey, that's mine. Shopkeeper says, no, it's not. Imam Ali says, I'm telling you it's my armor. Shopkeeper says, I'm selling the armor, it's mine. I came upon it, it's mine. Imam Ali says, let's go to the judge and he'll decide between us. Now the shopkeeper didn't know that this is Imam Ali, didn't know this is the Khalifa of Mu'mineen, Muslimeen of the time and whatnot. He says, okay, fine, bring your argument. Two of them go in front of the judge, the suit of armor is brought. The judge looks at the two in front of him and he looks at Imam Ali and he says, yes, Amir al-Mu'mineen, what do you want me to do? Upon hearing this, the shopkeeper starts like changing colors. He's like, oh my God, I'm going against the Khalifa? This is the Khalifa? And he imagines immediately that Imam Ali will immediately say, kill this guy, oppress this guy, throw him in jail. And Imam Ali simply turns to the judge and he says, pass judgment. We came for judgment. So the judge says, okay, what's the claim? Imam Ali says, I claim that this shopkeeper has my armor and he's selling my armor. He turns to the shopkeeper, what do you claim? The shopkeeper says, well, I bought the armor, I'm selling it. It's in my shop, I'm selling it. I've had it for a while and it's something that I have the right to sell. He turns to Imam Ali, says, do you have any witnesses? What proof do you have that this is yours? Imam Ali says, it's mine. It's sufficient for me. I know that this is my armor. The judge turns to him and he says, listen, Imam Ali, you know this as well as I do, but for his sake we'll explain it, that in Islam, possession shows ownership. If he's possessing this, if it's in his possession, it means he has ownership and the right to sell it. If you disagree with that, you have to demonstrate some level of proof that shows that you have true ownership of this and not the person possessing it. This fundamental, by the way, is really important because that's what allows us today to go into a market and buy something a shopkeeper is selling us. Because if he has it, then he has the right to sell it. Otherwise, we'd have to ask, where did it come from? How did you get it? Show me that it's legitimately yours before we would buy it. But the possession allows us to go into a shop and trust the shopkeeper and buy it. So the judge says, on the basis of the fact that he has possession and that shows ownership, I have to rule in his favor if you don't have any proof otherwise. Imam Ali says, I don't have any proof otherwise. The judge says, then fine, then it stays in the Jewish man's possession. Imam Ali then walks away and leaves the affair and he says, fine, if this is what justice is, I leave it at that. Now, side story on this as well too, that Imam Ali, though he knew the reality of everything, was always forced to rule on the concept of what was apparently just. That even though at times it would happen that a truthful person didn't have the witnesses, He wouldn't get the judgment from Imam Ali because Imam Ali had to judge on the apparent nature. The only of the Imams who will have the permission to judge on the true nature of a substance is the government and the authority of the Imam of our time, Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman. And that's something unique about the government of Imam Zaman, that Imam Zaman will never ask anybody for a witness. He will rule on the true reality of whatever the issue is in front of him and never have to ask for a witness about who is telling the truth and who is not, and try to determine from reality. He will always explain reality of what it truly is. But this story of Imam Ali, the consequences, the Jewish man after this incident comes back to Imam Ali and submits to the religion of Islam and becomes a Muslim. Imam Ali says, why? He says, because I knew you were telling the truth. And you, possessing authority, still preferred justice, though it wasn't in your favor, and you could force me to follow you and you didn't. And if there's someone who is so just, who could be just even against himself, then that's the religion I want to follow, that's the person I want to follow. And this Jewish man became a Muslim and returned Imam Ali's armor to him. The significance of the story is, now take a look back at the incident of Fadak, where they usurp something from Bibi Fatima, and then tell her to bring witnesses against herself to show that she has authority. The reality was that they had the obligation, because they were the ones usurping her property, to bring witnesses to show that she didn't actually own this. Which is why the conversation around Bibi Fatima is a conversation around really understanding the message of Islam or not. That did I really believe in the message of the Prophet? That if this person who is a piece of the Prophet, can she tell a lie? Can I go on the opposition side of her? Can I disagree with her? This is why humanity gets split into three groups when it comes into the issue of Bibi Fatima. Those who acknowledge her and understand her and follow her and believe in her truthfulness and whatever her claim is, understand that her claim has truth and authority behind it and stand with her. And there are those then who are the enemies, who clearly stand against this issue, and who come and argue and say that there is no right in this. And there's even the argument of saying that why did she stand up for this? Some come and present and say that she stood up for this to prove the authority of Imam Ali. Ibn Abi Hadid, Mu'tazili, who is a Sunni scholar who wrote about Nahj al-Balagha, he writes and he says, I asked my teacher, why didn't they just give it to her? Why did they have to argue with her and not give it to her? And his teacher replies, he says, it wasn't just a question about Fadak. Rather, the issue was that if they believed her on this and accepted her truthfulness in the claim that she doesn't lie, then today they would give her Fadak, and then tomorrow when she would come and say the authority of Khilafat is the possession of Ali ibn Abi Talib, they would have to admit that she was telling the truth there. And to some, this is the purpose of the discussion around Fadak, which is why you don't see the other A'imma plead for the position of Fadak or fight for the position of Fadak. And Imam Ali doesn't force the position of Fadak. And its true measure was to support the Khilafat of Imam Ali and the authority of Imam Ali. But there's another perspective on this as well too, is that not to show and say that this was only in the support of Imam Ali, but to show that both of these personalities were oppressed. That Imam Ali was oppressed with his Khilafat stolen, and say that Fatima was oppressed in her right being taken. Both received their rights to be stolen. And this is to show that they were both authorities of Allah who went through oppression and difficulty together. That though they are different, and Bibi Fatima is not an imam, doesn't mean that her status is any less. This discussion gets into a very lengthy conversation, inshallah we can continue tomorrow night, but the oppression that she goes under, she describes herself and says, Subbat alayya al-masa'ib, lo subbat ala al-ayyam sirna layali. She complains to her father and says, oh father, after you left me, oppression has been poured over me, difficulties have been poured over me in such a way that had these difficulties been poured over days, the days would have become nights from the darkness of oppression. Which is why it wasn't enough that they stole her right, but they went further to attack her house. One of the conversations that comes around the shahadat of Bibi Fatima is, why was she behind the door? You see, after the shahadat of Rasulullah, they wanted to force Imam Ali into submitting to Khilafat, and Imam Ali was not intent on this. They sent soldiers to the house of Bibi Fatima, and Bibi Fatima came to her door to de-escalate the situation. When the first time that they came, and they surrounded her house and demanded that Ali ibn Abi Talib come out, she called out from inside of her house, this is the daughter of the house of Rasulullah. My father is the one who brought you to this religion. Are you truly going to attack my door? They became embarrassed and left. They came a second time, and again she stood behind the door and called out and said that my father would stand at my door for 6 months of his life and say salam to me before he would go to pray. And you are coming here to break down my door, and you are coming here to attack me? And again they became embarrassed and left the door of Bibi Fatima. But the third time such a mal'oon came that he piled the wood at the door, lit it on fire, and when she put out her hand to show that I am the daughter of Rasulullah, will you truly attack my house? There are two statements that are done here. One, that the call was answered, walau, and so what if there is the daughter of the Prophet in this house? And that two, that hand that came out, they struck with a whip. And they pushed the door in such a way that Bibi Fatima was pinned between the door and the wall, that they describe her feet were lifted from the ground. When she fell from here, سَقَطَ جَنِينَهَا, that her son Hussain was killed. But this was not that moment in which all the difficulty was abated. As she said, this was that time where so many difficulties were poured upon her, that it was as if days would become into nights. What they say is, in this moment, Amir al-Mu'mineen comes running to the door, seeing the jurrat, seeing the daring of these people, pushes away the attackers. They say in that moment we captured Ali because we knew that Ali had been commanded to be patient in difficulties. They said when Ali came out and pushed us away from the door, someone took a rope and put it around his neck and started to drag him through the streets of Medina towards the Khalifa. They say that Bibi Fatima, looking at the condition of Ali ibn Abi Talib, forgot her own condition, left her house, went running after Ali ibn Abi Talib. They describe two statements. Fatima's first statement where she says, I am asking you to not drag Ali, not to abuse Ali in the streets of Medina. In reply to this statement, they describe that Mal'un raised the scabbard of his sword and started to strike at Bibi Fatima herself, to where she was forced to make the second statement. I am not asking you to leave Ali. I am asking you to stop striking me in the city of Medina. They describe that in this condition, Amir al-Mu'mineen was dragged in front to give bay'ah. Sayyidah Zahra came outside of the masjid, raised her hands and said, if you do not release him now, I will raise my hands in dua and ask for Allah's punishment to be set upon you. They narrate and they say that the walls of the houses of Medina became raised off the ground so high that they said a camel could have passed under them. In this condition, Amir al-Mu'mineen motions to Salman. Salman, speak to her, calm her down. He says, oh Sayyidah Zahra, your father said to be patient. He said to be patient in these difficulties. She says, I was patient when they came and attacked my house. I was patient when they took my property from me. I was patient when they killed my Muhsin. But now they are attacking the authority of Allah on this earth. Fatima will not be patient anymore. If they do not return Ali with me at this moment, I will pray upon them such a punishment that has not been seen before. In fear of this statement, they released Ali ibn Abi Talib. There is a narration from Imam Hassan about the conversation between these two as they walk back from leaving this place. They describe and say that Ali ibn Abi Talib turns to Zahra and he says, Zahra, are you okay? Sayyidah Zahra replies, oh Ali, if you are okay, then I am okay. They proceed towards the house. Imam Hassan, a child of 7, weeps in this moment. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, oh Hassan, why are you crying? He says, Baba, if you had seen what I saw, you would weep as well. He says, they struck my mother's face so hard. Her eye became injured and she could not see from it. Ali says, Hauna, that is why Zahra would not look Ali in the eye when she answered my question. على لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره. These were those difficulties that led to the eventual shahadat of Sayyidah Fatima. These were those difficulties that led for her short life after this incident to be full of pain and difficulty, and was not the end of her masa'ib. We ask Allah بحق فاطمة وأبيها وبعلها وبنيها وسر المستودع فيها. Oh Allah, by the right of Bibi Fatima, her father, her husband, her sons, and the secrets from Sayyidah Fatima, that oh Allah, accept this small ibadat from us. Ya Allah, by the right of Bibi Fatima, keep us on the upright path of Ali Muhammad. Oh Allah, entitle us the Shifa of Sayyidah Zahra in this world and the hereafter. Oh Allah, we ask that we have come here with hajat by the right of the mention of the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt. Fulfill our hajat. Ya Allah, there are those amongst our families, the mu'mineen, who are suffering through sickness and disease. Give shifa'ah to the mu'mineen wherever they are. Those who are suffering through strife and insecurity, give aman to the mu'mineen, muslimin, wherever they are. Oh Allah, give the thawab of this majlis and this mention to our marhameen and all those who are in need of dua. Hasten the reappearance of Sahib al-Zaman. Make us and our families and our children from the upright supporters of Sahib al-Zaman. One Surah Fatiha with your loudest of salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.